His scrubs still smelled like antiseptic and coffee when he walked his bike through the sliding glass doors at the end of his shift. The main lobby was warm and loud, visitors crowding the chairs, the squeak of rubber soles on polished tile filling every gap in conversation. A voice cut through the noise, high and insistent. He ignored it at first. People yelling in a hospital are about as notable as a beeping monitor. But this one kept getting closer. Hey, pizza guy. The woman was in her 40s, maybe, her face tight with frustration, one hand waving and the other pressing a phone to her ear. She was staring right at him. She pointed at the red saddlebag strapped to the back of his bike. He looked down at himself, blue scrubs, rubber Crocs, canvas bag slung across his chest. From a distance, with a lazy glance, he could almost see how she made the mistake. She wanted to know if that was her pizza, if he had been looking for her, if he knew he was late. She told him she had been waiting all afternoon. He held up one palm and said, "Ma'am, I work here. I'm a doctor." Her face went slack. She blinked twice, mumbled something that might have been an apology, and disappeared back into the crowd without another word. He has been mistaken for a nurse before, for a medical student, even for a patient wandering the halls, but never for a delivery driver. There is something humbling about how invisible we become the moment someone decides what we must be. Was she embarrassed enough to learn something from it? Or is blaming context just part of being human? Mistaken identity stories usually rely on awkwardness for their punchline, but this one reveals something sharper. The moment we assign someone a role, we stop seeing them entirely. The woman wasn't rude, she was efficient. She saw bike plus bag, and her brain auto-complete the rest. That efficiency is useful in a crowded world, but it also means we walk past doctors, artists, and people with entire lives. The rustle of taffeta was the only warning he got before the door flew open. A bride in a full white gown burst out of the Macy's dressing room, spotted him scrolling his phone against the wall, and locked on like she'd found her savior. Finally, someone who looks like they know what they're doing. "Zip me up and tell me the truth. Does this make my hips look weird?" She spun around before he could answer, presenting her back like he was hired staff. He told her, gently, that he did not work here, that he was a man buying deodorant who had been standing in that hallway for 11 minutes. She stared at him for 3 seconds and said, "Okay. But seriously though, the hips?" He had never been so completely dominated by peer pressure in his life. He zipped the dress. The zipper slid up clean. He told her the hips looked great, because they did, and because he needed this moment to end before it consumed his entire identity. She hugged him. A complete stranger in a wedding dress wrapped her arms around him in a department store hallway. Her maid of honor walked up mid-embrace and said, "Wait, who is that?" The bride waved a hand. "Oh, he works here." And then she was gone, trailing taffeta and absolute certainty. His girlfriend emerged from her fitting room just in time to see him standing there, arms at his sides, freshly hugged by a bride. She looked at him, looked at the disappearing white dress. "I leave you alone for 10 minutes. There are people in this world whose reality is so magnetic it bends everyone around it." He never stood a chance. Was I supposed to walk away the second she asked? The most interesting part of this story isn't the mistaken identity. It's that the bride's complete confidence in her own reality actually worked. She needed a dress zipped, so she found someone to zip it. That level of assumption-based living is something most adults lose after childhood. There is a strange power in being the kind of person who simply decides the world will accommodate them and then watches it happen. The rustle of taffeta. The clipboard's metal clip dug into his palm, hard enough to leave a mark. A woman's voice cut through the quiet, frantic and desperate. "Thank God you're here. The flowers arrived wrong. The caterer moved the timeline up an hour. What do we do?" She grabbed his arm before he could answer and started pulling him toward the ballroom, words spilling out about seating charts and her mother-in-law and her aunt, who absolutely cannot sit together. He tried twice to tell her she had the wrong person, but she wasn't hearing anything except the disaster in her head. When he finally stopped walking and said, "Ma'am, I don't work here," she froze. Her eyes traveled from his blazer to his clipboard to his face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're not Denise." The real wedding coordinator was stuck in traffic an hour away, and this bride was 60 minutes from her ceremony with no one running it. He could have pointed her to the front desk and walked away, but he didn't. "Look," he said. I don't know weddings. But I'm good at making calls and solving problems. Let's fix the timeline first. For the next 40 minutes, he called the caterer, rearranged 2 table assignments, and talked her down from full-blown panic. When the real Denise finally burst through the ballroom doors, the bride threw her arms around him like he was her brother. A bottle of red wine showed up at his hotel room that night with a note. To my emergency wedding planner, you saved my day. He missed the entire first day of his conference. But watching someone go from sheer panic to peace because a stranger decided to help? That's a better use of a morning than any seminar could offer. Here's the thing about kindness, though. It always costs you something. Usually time. And time is the one thing nobody can give you back. So tell me, would you have stopped, or would you have walked away? There's a quiet heroism in being useful without being qualified. This guy had 0 wedding planning experience, 0 responsibility, and every excuse to walk away. But he recognized something fundamental. The grinding jam of a printer cut through the quiet shop, a sound that made him wince before he even looked up from the touchscreen. He was standing at the self-serve kiosk in a stiff dress shirt, collar rubbing against his neck, trying to figure out why the paper size kept defaulting to something wrong. The machine beeped at him every time he hit confirm. He was still fighting with the menu when a woman's voice broke through. She needed help with her machine. She was sure he could fix it because he looked like he knew what he was doing. The admission that he didn't work there came out awkward, but she didn't seem to hear it. She just pointed at the paper jam error and waited. He walked over anyway because walking away felt worse than wasting 2 minutes. The side panel on her machine had a latch completely hidden unless you knew printers well enough to guess where it would be. He found it by touch more than sight. A torn scrap of paper wedged near the roller, barely visible in the dim interior. He pulled it out with 2 fingers. The machine hummed back to life. She thanked him like he'd just fixed her entire week. Asked if he was sure he didn't work there, because the actual employee had disappeared into the back room and never returned. He grabbed his warm resume pages from the other machine and left. She watched him go. There is something revealing about how quickly people assign authority to anyone who looks competent in a uniform-adjacent shirt. He was not qualified to help, but he did anyway, and that made all the difference. Was he supposed to just say no? This is the bystander effect in reverse. Instead of everyone assuming someone else will help, one person assumes another is the employee and asks them directly. The narrator helped not because he knew how, but because refusing felt socially costlier than trying. Most of us have been on both sides of this equation, and it reveals how thin the line between being helpful and being obliging really is. We help because saying no requires more spine than we have in the grinding jam. The pull on his collar was sharp enough to yank him off balance before the voice even reached him. He had worked at Home Depot for over a year, knew every employee by name, had regulars who asked for him specifically, and remembered his face. But he quit 12 months ago for a real career, something that didn't leave orange dust in his hair and his knees throbbing after every shift. Today he was just passing through the parking lot, dropping off his fiancée at her job in the same shopping center, and he figured he'd pop in to say a quick hello to his best friend, the guy who's going to stand beside him at the altar in a few months. He wandered the aisles in a faded red t-shirt and jeans with holes chewed into both knees, nothing about his appearance suggesting he was on the clock. He heard a woman's voice behind him asking someone for help, but kept walking because he didn't work here and hadn't for a full year. Then he spotted his friend emerging from the break room and picked up his pace. And then her fingers dug into his collar and pulled. She yanked him backward hard enough that the seam scraped across his throat. He turned to find a woman in her mid-50s staring at him with absolute certainty. "Excuse me, young man. Didn't you hear me asking for help?" He told her calmly that he didn't work here. She didn't blink. "Yes, you do. I remember you. Don't you lie to me." His best friend stepped between them and explained that the man in the red shirt hadn't worked here in over a year. The woman stared at him for a long moment and then walked off without a single word of apology. There's something uniquely unsettling about being grabbed by a stranger who has already decided who you are. She wasn't confused. She was absolutely certain, and her certainty was more real to her than any fact or explanation he could offer. Have you ever had a stranger refuse to let go of a version of you that never really existed? There's a peculiar power dynamic in retail where a customer's sense of entitlement doesn't just demand service, it demands recognition. The woman wasn't looking for help finding a product. She wanted confirmation that her mint. The smell of stale popcorn and floor wax hit him one last time as he walked out of Retail Mart on Halloween night, dressed as Luffy, a gift basket under his arm and his vest already in the trash. After nearly a third of his life working digital orders across 2 locations, he had finally landed a salary job. He gave proper notice, text messages, a formal typed letter, more than 2 weeks. His whole department celebrated, patted his back, begged him not to leave them to burn. He trashed his vest in the break room and flipped off the building as he left. The next morning, he started training. Salary meant monthly pay, which meant a gap. No insurance, no money until that first check hit. He was counting on his final Retail Mart paycheck, loaded with 50 to 60 hours of saved paid time off, to carry him through November. Then he hurt his knee in a stupid way, but refused to get it checked because he thought he had no coverage. He limped through training, waiting for the money that was supposed to be there. The check came. $100. No PTO. Just 2 days of regular pay. He checked the employee app. He was still listed as active. Still on the schedule. They had added him back for a shift right before Thanksgiving. He had insurance this whole time, and had been limping around for nothing, but also had no money because they never actually processed his termination. 50 to 60 hours of PTO gone. Rent, food, medication, car insurance. All hanging on a paycheck that never came. The real gut punch. He had to walk back into that store and beg them to fire him. After the celebration, the gift basket, the vest trashing, the building flip-off, he had to plead for unemployment. Was the system designed to trap people, or just broken enough to ruin one person at a time? What makes this story so infuriating is not the corporate incompetence. It is the way the system is designed to be just broken enough that the burden of fixing it falls entirely on the individual. The narrator did. The scream of rubber against asphalt echoed across 3 lanes of traffic, and the old sedan never even slowed down. It tore from the far left lane all the way to the exit ramp in one jagged diagonal sweep, clipping the painted line so hard it kicked up a cloud of white dust. Horns erupted everywhere. Cars swerved. The driver in the silver SUV behind him slammed the brake so hard his groceries launched off the passenger seat and hit the floor. For a moment, the whole highway felt like it held its breath. The sedan made the exit without a scratch and kept driving like nothing happened. He was on that ramp at full speed, and he did not care. The guy behind him, 28 years old, just getting off a double shift, sat gripping his steering wheel, so tight his knuckles turned white. He was furious. Not the kind of angry where you yell once and let it go. The kind where your jaw locks and your hands start shaking. He pulled up to the red light, one car behind the sedan. The driver was right there. He could see the guy, mid-50s, baseball cap, not a care in the world. And something in him just broke. He rolled down his window and got that look ready. The one that says you are the worst human being on this road. The sedan driver glanced over at the exact wrong moment and locked eyes with him. The rage was right there on his face. But then, for reasons he still cannot fully explain, something shifted. His expression softened. His eyebrows went up. He nodded slowly, mouthed the words, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. Sorry," and gave the guy a little smile and a wave. The sedan driver's face went completely blank. Then it twisted into pure confusion. The guy in the SUV was already gone. He pulled away from that red light feeling lighter than he had in months. Not because he won anything. Not because the other driver learned a lesson. Just because he realized that every time he chose rage, he was giving away a piece of his day to someone who did not even know he existed. He has been doing this for 3 months now. Every single time. The smell of pine incense hit her before she even saw him. A familiar yet unfamiliar presence filling the small living room. Her friends whispered behind her back when he was around, and the way he exaggerated his affection made her stomach twist in that familiar knot of discomfort. 10 years after the breakup, he was now remarried and coaching their daughter, and he was going out of his way to show her off. As he kissed her passionately, then brushed his hand across her waist, the tension in the room became visible. The air crackled with the weight of 2 worlds colliding. When he began bragging about how perfect she was, the crowd fell into that awkward pause, like everyone was waiting for something to happen, but not quite daring to breathe. Her heart hammered in a kind of cruel celebration when she said that line, splitting the room open and watching him freeze in that stunned moment of realization. The crowd went oddly silent, and he hovered, looking over his shoulder, barely talking to anyone, his carefully constructed confidence shattered to pieces. He was suddenly the one on edge, while she felt that strange satisfaction from having momentarily turned him into the vulnerable one. He never made that same flamboyant gesture again in front of everyone, always keeping his distance and watching her like he was being careful not to spill the tea. The irony of revenge through invisibility was greater than the loud revenge she had planned. Watching the man she'd broken apart years earlier now tiptoeing around her like he'd accidentally stepped in something gross, all because she had the small power to remind him what used to be. Was I in the wrong here? The most fascinating part of this story is how the old flame's power dynamics completely flipped 180 degrees after years of separation. The woman's revenge wasn't about seeking justice for the broken relationship or proving something about the past. It was about establishing her own power right now in that moment, regardless of what good the revenge actually served. It's a